really kind of closed, like heads down, introducing them to orchestration, showing them what they can build with orchestration, what they will be able to build as we expand the product offering. And then separately, there was Unfold, which is a side event hosted by Octo in CoinDTX, which is the largest, one of the largest, maybe the largest. Jeet might know the numbers. Exchanges in India, very very popular exchange. Um, and so they held a side event that was entirely kind of developer focused with some talks. So we got on stage, talked there. And then there was IBW, which is the kind of main conference that most people attended, went to Bangalore. And so, by the way, this was all in Bangalore, India. And so IBW was a 2-day, 3-day conference as well that, a bunch of talks. So more content based than hackathon specifically. So there it was much more, again, listening to talks, right? Meeting with accelerators and teams and agencies and potential teams that are looking for where to deploy, but less builder focused. So those are the three kind of main events. I won't get into all the other side events that were popped up from different companies, but yeah, those are the main focuses.
And with those events, how did you find the turnout for the Hacker House and for the Unfold, all of the dev events?
Yeah, I mean, for our Hacker House, look, we were, this was the second time we did it in India. The first time was kind of a test run for us, kind of understanding the lay of the land, seeing, where developers were finding challenges in our solution, where developers were finding, builder blocks. And so this was technically the second event we did. We were expecting like 25. When I showed up, I was expecting 25 to 30 people. That's kind of where we benchmarked, and then we ended up getting more than double that, right? So we ended up getting about 75 builders with, I think, about 18 projects submitted by the end of the 2 days. So for us, it was super successful. I mean, Jeet can attest to this. Jeet's one of the big reasons why we're also looking at India, because it is such a kind of rapidly growing region for Web3 development. But yeah, I mean, from a results perspective, we were definitely taken aback and really happy. And then Unfold, I think, also found similar success, right? Like they also beat the numbers they were planning as an event. So I think they ended up getting 600 plus developers to show up, which is a lot of developers in one area. Um, and then I think they had something like 100 and like across all of the different tracks, they had something like 110, was it, Jeet, projects submitted. Um, and that was across maybe 8 different company tracks or 9 different company tracks. So equally super successful, and IBW was packed as well. I mean, they also did a pretty good job there. But I honestly think the developer events, in my opinion, were much stronger and more interesting. And I think just generally attracted a lot more, talent, right? Because it's all about like getting your hands into the code, building, learning. So that was awesome. But yeah, overall a big success from my side.
And do you want to comment on anything, expand on that? Had
Yeah,
anything?
I won't reiterate too much on what Santi said, because I think, yet again, the focus was really on just trying to connect with the builders, and we got some really great projects out of it. And I would say that, like, definitely some really interesting ones as well, like interesting, like, use cases that combine both like AI, games, fitness, right, Santi? The one fitness app was really interesting. So yeah, a lot of just really cool things in general. And then one more thing I'd add is that I also I also at the end of the week spoke on a panel as well at the Chain side event, which is also nice. That really focused on both like entrepreneurship and the Indian ecosystem for builders. And that also had a really great turnout. So a big shout out to Chain for letting me speak there and hosting a great event.
Now, coming to the participants and the attendees, when you're speaking with people, and Jake, maybe this one's for you, do you find that people already know Agoric, or are people still learning about it for the first time? And just another piece to this question is, do you think interest in Agoric is picking up, or are we still spending a lot of time explaining the basics?
Yeah, so I would say that India as a whole is very so the first major project to take off in India was Polygon, right? So India is very familiar with both Polygon, other L2s, or I guess technically Polygon besides Gen, but like other L2s, and that entire ecosystem. And then last year, uh, Aptos and Sui both put a lot of time and effort into expanding out, as well as Avalanche. What's really interesting is that I'd say a good mix. Like some people have heard of Agoric, some people have not. But explaining it is really interesting because once you kind of explain the value of it, talk about hardened JavaScript and what it can do, and especially like with chain abstraction now, people I think are very interested because yet again, a lot of people have things already built out in, let's say, EVM world. Yet again, a lot of I think something like most new smart contracts made in Aptos right now are actually made in India as well. So like several other large projects have found lots of success there in building out developer ecosystems. So I think the nice thing is with Agoric, everything is complementary, right? It's not rewrite your smart contracts here for Move or Solidity, but superpower what you're doing now and added a lot of new features in. So I'd say that yes, while there is a decent amount of explaining, especially around chain abstraction, once you do explain the value proposition, to people are pretty on board. So yet again, I was really happy, as Santi mentioned, with the amount of applicants we got and the number of people that actually ended up building something on Agoric. So yeah, looking forward to seeing more of that success carry on.
And Santi, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think Jeet nailed it. Yeah, it was cool to see how, yeah, I mean, orchestration was so complementary to a lot of things people had already built or had domain expertise in other entirely separate fields, like AI, as Jeet mentioned. There were a few AI projects that came forward. There were a few people who had built like lending protocols on different platforms that really wanted to explore like what orchestrative cross-chain could look like for them. So that was all, yeah, that was all awesome to see. So no, I don't have anything different to add.
Coming back to the hackathon events, um, with those, what kind of participants did you see there? Was it mostly young crypto blockchain enthusiasts, or are you also seeing seasoned JavaScript professionals curious about jumping into Web3? Santi.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general demographic leans younger. I think it's a lot of either students or developers who've been out of school for a few years and have some kind of JavaScript background. Um, I mean, we had builders who were like diehard Python people. There were a few like Rust maxis who were like, "All right, we want to figure this out." They'd been in the Solana ecosystem or currently had a project in Solana and wanted to explore like a new ecosystem. So there was definitely a mix from like a technical perspective, but I would say a lot of the devs are definitely on the younger side, right? Like very early entrepreneurs, right, who want to find a foothold somewhere and actually build something and deploy it, and kind of continue the pathway towards actually getting it on chain, right, and actually creating a business out of it. So I think this is very much like the first early step for a lot of those teams. But yeah, I mean that was my observation overall, even at Unfold, right, which was even a larger pool of people. But I felt the same kind of mix. I think you probably experienced the same, Jeet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, with these participants, for those participating in the hackathons and actually building, for those who are new to Agoric, how easy was it for them to get started? And were there moments where you saw someone's excitement click as it all began to click and they understood what they were doing and what the possibilities are?
Yeah, I mean, I think with learning any new contract framework, and beyond the contract framework, how all of the pieces operate together, I think there's always going to be a challenge. I don't think I've heard anyone jump on any framework and be like, "Oh, this is easy, cool, I'm done." I think also the time frames that we're talking about are like 24 hours to 48 hours. Very, very little time to actually learn, kind of immerse yourself in a tech and then build something fully flush. So I was actually really blown away by how fast people actually learned orchestration. I mean, there's a lot of improvements I think we still have to do from a DX perspective, so developer experience perspective, in making that onboarding experience simpler. And I think there's a lot of things we need to do around like education. So, really kind of beefing up the materials and the content we provide developers ahead of time so that by the time they get to our events, they're just a little more familiar with our stack and how the pieces work. That's something like that's just an ongoing effort, right? Like everybody in the world has to do that. So And, I think those two things are going to kind of drastically reduce that onboarding time for developers and make it, you know, get them to that aha moment much quicker. But I would say after about the first day, by the time people had their entire environment set up, right, could kind of um, kind of figure out how all the pieces work together, they could get to actually solving their problem statement or their use case that they were building, and then, work towards, okay, how do I now take this other domain expertise I have and actually utilize this orchestration framework to build this cross-chain thing, right? Or to build this, this ticketing system where I can onboard multiple collateral types and or multiple asset types, excuse me, and then use that for payments. So yeah, I think our big goal is constantly reducing that, right? Reducing that onboarding time and working as much as possible to make that a reality.
And with these, with the people participating in building, I know you just said it was a short period of time and fitting the name Fast Hack. But did you find there were any novel ideas that put orchestration into a new perspective, or anything where it was that we didn't think of that before?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so I think definitely some of the AI plays were interesting. I mean, it's hard to say we've never thought about anything tangentially related to some of the ideas. We're a 40-person team with ideas flying around all day, and I think Jeet can attest to that. But there were definitely some use cases and problem statements that were really interesting, and very related to like current issues the developers were facing, like in India, whether it be like onboarding and offboarding, or on ramping and off ramping for assets. That's been traditionally difficult, and someone's trying to build a solution for that. Like Web3 QR payments. So there's a big system in India called UPI for like very simple onboarding of users, where you can connect your bank account through your mobile, and then make payments almost, I guess, immediately, basically in person by just scanning a QR code, right? You don't need to take out your credit card. You don't need to like send money to anybody. It's just scan, put the number in, and pay, right? And so someone was like, well, we need that for Web3 here, right? Because that would be awesome if I could just do that with a bunch of different cross-chain assets and like immediately make a payment, right? It's like a very, very real use case. The other big things we saw, there were a few ticketing platforms that were trying to kind of circumvent the issues that not just India, right? But like we've all faced by like going to events and someone buys 1,000 tickets and then they upsell them for 100x that price. That happens a lot. And so someone was building a solution by which you could do actual offline payments. So you'd like basically put assets into a pool, which partly would go towards the ticket, would lock you in, and then actually save a certain amount for offline payments at the venue. And so that was really novel and like a pretty complex system they built, but they actually completed it by the end of it, which was nuts. So huge props to that team. And then there was a lot more of like, I think there was a lot of like the DeFi primitive stuff, right? Like that we're maybe more familiar with, around cross-chain payments and lending protocols, NFT marketplaces. Yeah, there was yeah, I could go on and on about this. I mean, there's some really cool ones. Like I'm sure folks are familiar with like bill splitting apps, right? Where like us three go to a restaurant, we sit there, the bill comes for $100, we split it. And so this team was like, all right, well, how do we do this with like orchestration, right? How do we actually do this in Web3 where we can split a bill with crypto really quickly? But other than that, like, why don't we create a mechanism where we all split the bill, but we set like a surcharge above that, and then we use that to deposit into like a yield bearing account. And then over time, right, the more bills you pay with people, the larger this kind of yield grows. And then it ends up becoming kind of like kind of akin to like the Acorn app, right, where you're kind of like putting the extra bit into an account, whatever, for savings. Instead, you're doing this in a more DeFi way, right? And that was something really cool I hadn't even thought about. But these guys built that out. So yeah, I could go on and on. There were some really, really cool ideas that definitely deserve being highlighted.
And Jeet, down the same line, but from your conversations in ecosystem growth and development, are you finding your conversations with other teams that orchestration is giving them new ideas, or are they bringing a new perspective in a way that you hadn't thought about before?
What I end up finding is more of adding functionality to things. So more more making it's more about, from what I've seen, the UX. I wouldn't say I specifically at this event saw a lot of like completely new novel cross chain use cases, but definitely a lot of, like, for example, right, as uh, meme coins and pump get very like interesting to people, moving assets around between different ecosystems becomes really interesting, right? This is where like orchestration can actually help greatly. Bridging between different ecosystems can be a pain, so making it relatively easy for new folks, especially who are used to using assets in a certain ecosystem, that's really useful. And then, as kind of Santi mentioned, I think India specifically as a market has a lot of benefits for just payment rails, right? So UPI, as Santi said, that's the national standard for payments. It's actually, so India actually has a tech stack, which is really interesting. But the nice thing about that is like everyone basically has a bank account in UPI, or most people do. So it's really easy to have a standard way to onboard new users and new use cases in that sense. But adding a lot of functionality to that is important because there's a lot of limitations around what UPI can do, specifically for like the amounts that are capped, or the way money can move around, or the time it takes. So um, crypto, in addition to UPI, can add in a lot of value, and also add in a lot of new like financial products, especially on the smaller side, where micro lending, like just being able to settle up payments, as Santi said, like like cost splitting apps, they're really interesting as well. So yeah, these are the kind of things I primarily sell in the market there.
And thanks for that. And so moving into our closing questions, if you had to pick, what was the most valuable part of attending India Blockchain Week? Was it, feedback, any notable feedback from participants, the connections you made, or just seeing the ecosystem grow? From both of you, starting with you, Santi, what was your highlight?
I mean, being incredibly bullish on India is probably my big takeaway for a lot of reasons. I think the big highlight is how much entrepreneurship goes on there. That's just kind of thunderous in a lot of ways. That was a big takeaway for me. And I think what was the term, Jeet? That you were talking about, where it's people don't take themselves seriously but take work seriously.
Bakchod.
Bakchod. Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, that like more from a cultural perspective, but like, everyone is super approachable, right? I mean, it was very easy to talk to teams, right? Really just sit down, have a good time, and then, have the moments where you're talking about tech and being serious, obviously, and working on projects. But like culturally, that was, for me, it was my first time in India too. So it was a huge takeaway in that sense, which I appreciated a lot.
And how about you, G? Main
Yeah.
highlight takeaways.
Yeah, on my side, I mean, I'll mirror part of that. And I am a bit I have a bit of an availability bias in the sense, right? I'm originally from India. I go back every year to visit family. So it's been really interesting, and I've been an entrepreneur before as well in the scene in India. So like, it's come up a lot in the last 10 years or so. A lot of really hungry like solo entrepreneurs, especially, right? Like I was just blown away by the sheer number of people that were building out projects, but like protocols, but working on things on the side. It has an incredible hustle culture where after seeing everything, it makes me really convinced that even if different blockchain infrastructure is being built around the world, I just strongly feel that India will end up building a lot of the apps that we'll see often being used. Partially because like there's a strong culture of both just hustling yourself. There's also a lot of use cases for crypto within India. So both at a local scale, global scale, that made me very bullish. And then beyond that, it was really great to see some really good projects that people built out. And Santi can attest to this. Just really sleek, clean, good front ends, really useful projects. It's not just we're just gonna slap on a little bit of we're just gonna add it in the blockchain slightly here, and then it does something. Like it was these are actually like full featured projects. So it was just really exciting to see that, and watching people pick up Agoric in a relatively short amount of time and then build something out was really just made me really happy. So looking forward to more events in India, looking forward to more hackathons, builder events, and then finally I'll end on saying that like more than anything though is just seeing what a good crypto community can be. Indian culturally is a very very community driven place, and then seeing what could happen there just gives me a lot of also hope for other ecosystems around the world. Where I'm based in New York, and something like seeing what I saw this last week made me really want to actually next year focus on trying to build out as much as we can in New York City around that. So yeah, it was just really inspiring. Really great to see a lot of energy in the space, and whatever we can kind of see, depending on where people are based, but whatever we can kind of see in Western markets. Crypto is very speculative, and it has specific use cases, and people using it in certain ways. But watching just a room full of like hundreds of developers just hacking away and building out stuff really quickly with a lot of passion was just really exciting to me.
Awesome. Thank you both. One last question from the list of community questions. Do you see, sorry, are you looking to expand to a similar approach to non-crypto events like JavaScript forward events or traditional Web 2 activities? And Santi, maybe for you.
So I think there's so there's a challenge with trying to kind of introduce something large in the technology at a technology conference, right? And I think what we've seen in the past is trying to kind of you know deciding to be in Web3 and finding the values of Web3 and kind of understanding its position in like the global scale is something you can't really do by just looking at the tech, right? I think crypto in a lot of ways can be a lifestyle, right? It can be an ecosystem, it can be a lot of things beyond just the tech. And so just going to like a JavaScript conference and positioning our tech and our solutions for JS devs without them having crossed that chasm already in some capacity, I think is potentially very kind of like resource expensive and just kind of time expensive, right? To get people onboarded with that. And that's, I mean, that's why we focus on Web3 events predominantly, right? Or almost exclusively, is because folks there have kind of made a self-selection to be at these conferences to learn, educate themselves about Web3 technology, or a solution that could, solve the problem they're facing. And that's just a much stronger fit for us as a solutions company. So yeah, I think that's kind of my blanket statement over. I don't know if Jeet feels differently than that, but
No, I would agree 100%, right? It's just it's really one thing that I just probably the thing I enjoyed most about the event overall is just seeing where the future lies and where we can go, and getting the excitement and the kind of energy around people building on Agoric, and yeah, carrying it on to the future.
And so wrap up, do you have any last thoughts, anything that wasn't asked that maybe you came prepared to answer today, Santi?
um, yeah, I mean, I kind of came with an open agenda here. I'm open to answering questions as much as possible. I I don't. I think I've yapped a lot. I don't know if I have anything different than what I've said. Other than I'm very strong believer in having a focus in India. I think it's with the short kind of amount of time and resources we put into India, it's shown us something really really powerful in return. So that's what I leave kind of the entire experience with is like this is a place that we need to really prioritize and continue prioritizing and learning from in a lot of ways.
That seems like a great place to stop, Jeet, unless you have anything you wanted to chime in about and anything that was missed that you maybe wanted to mention.
Yeah, nothing in addition, but like definitely open to kind of volunteer Santi as well, right? I think we're definitely open to questions and seeing what we can answer about our experience and learnings from the space. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for your time. Thanks for joining us for this Community Connect and answering questions from members of the community. Um, the recording for this is going to be available on YouTube soon. Please subscribe to the newsletter, the Agoric newsletter, to stay up to date on all the latest news around chain abstraction, orchestration, the orchestration API, and by all means, everybody share your thoughts on Twitter, send us messages in Discord, and feel free to reach out. And with that, we'll wrap this up. So just one more time, thank you both for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, JD.
Thanks, everyone.